Hello and welcome back to the Auntie Lisa Show. Well, today we are doing a story about dinosaurs and Balthazar Bratt's guitar, or as it actually is called, a sonic keytar, because instead of having strings, it has keys. I looked it up. Okay, so one day at Jurassic World, Owen woke up to a horrifying noise. And the noise was this. It was a horrifying noise to be woken up by, because Owen does not like being woken up first thing in the morning by any kind of noise, but especially by a crazy guitar style riff noise. And he woke up with a start like this. What was that? Oh, God. What a horrible way to wake up. I need coffee. So he clambered out of his bed and he went over to his coffee machine. And he was just making himself a nice hot cup of coffee to perk him up when the noise happened again. And he went, oh, God, what is that? And he looked out the window and dinosaurs were going crazy all over Jurassic World. They'd also been woken up with a horrible start by that horrible, horrible noise. Anyway, so I thought, right, I've had enough of this. And he called up Claire. I said, Claire, did you hear that horrible noise this morning? And she said, oh yeah, it just woke me up. It is horrible. What is it? Where is it coming from? I need coffee. Owen said, come round to mine. I have the best coffee. So that's what she did. And they sat down and had a nice cup of coffee, which Owen had finally managed to make. And they said, right, we've got to figure out where that horrible noise is coming from. It's sending the poor dinosaurs crazy. I saw a Stegosaurus fall over. You don't often see a Stegosaurus fall over. They are very good centre of gravity, very low. Don't often fall over. Anyway, so she said, okay, well, we need to investigate. And so that is what they did. They had their coffee and off they went down into Jurassic World Central. And they had a look around. And they were like, can't see anything unusual here. The T-Rex was busy eating half a cow. The Brachiosauruses were eating loads of leaves as normal. And the Stegosaurus was back on its feet again. So he was a happy Stegosaurus. And they looked and they looked and they wandered all the way through the park until they came to the extra toilet block that had been put in because of so many visitors visiting. And when they got to the extra toilet block, they were like, oh no, what's happened here? The extra toilets, the portaloos, had all fallen over. It was a horrifying sight. A horrifying sight. They had to get Bob the poo cleaner guy in to clean up all the mess. He was not happy because he normally only deals with dinosaur poo. This time he had to deal with porta potty people poo, and it was horrifying. Anyway, so he cleaned it up and he was in a right old grump. And he said, what is going on, Owen? Why have all these portaloos fallen over? God, and did you guys hear that horrible noise this morning? And Owen and Claire went, yeah, we heard that horrible noise. We are so grumpy today, I tell you. We are so grumpy. Bob went, well, that makes 3 of us then. So they decided to work as a team to figure it out. But try as they might, they couldn't figure out where the noise had come from. And they said, how are we going to sort this out? And they thought, I know. We'll check the CCTV cameras. Aha! And that's what they did. And they looked on the CCTV cameras. Now, the big horrible noise had happened just before dawn, so it was dark. And all they could see on the CCTV cameras was a slight glint of light coming from behind a bush. And then all the porta potties had fallen over. And they were like, well, that doesn't explain anything. All we know is there was something behind that bush. But what could it have been? And how did it make those porta potties fall over? So, and for that matter, that Stegosaurus fall over. He had a bad start to the day. So, I said, okay, what we've got to do is we'll stay up, we'll get up really early tomorrow and we'll see if it happens again. This time, we'll be lying in wait. And I said, okay. So, they all set their alarms super early for the next morning. But before they even went to bed, before in fact they'd even had their dinner, it happened again. And they looked around like, what? Where did it even come from? Nobody could figure out where it come from. But something diabolical had happened. The T-Rex had fallen over. Now that is almost as unlikely to happen as a Stegosaurus falling over. The T-Rex had fallen over and he had smashed into the T-Rex enclosure's door, badly damaging it. And everyone went, oh, that's not good. There was now a hole in the T-Rex enclosure door. Not a big enough hole for a T-Rex to get through, mind you, but a hole nonetheless. And they were like, what on earth could have had such force that it's pushed over poor old T-Rex, who, by the way, at this point was trying to gravel his way back up off the floor. But it's not easy when you have tiny little arms. So he was like, and the T-Rex was so grumpy. It took him half an hour to get back on his feet because his tiny little hands can't push him up. It was a nightmare for him. He was like, Rah! He was a very unhappy T-Rex. And he started smashing things up in his enclosure. And they went, oh, what's going on? They gave the T-Rex to cheer him up another half a cow. And that did go some way to cheering up the T-Rex. Okay. This is getting out of hand. Let's check the CCTV again. Once again, all they could see was a glimmer of purple behind a bush. And then the T-Rex falling over and the door getting buckled. They were like, what is it? What is it? What is it? What is it? And they ran around behind the bush. And they hunted for any clues. And all they could find was a comb. And they were like, well, anyone could have dropped a comb here. Fine. What are we going to do now? So, they said, okay, let's keep our ears peeled and see what happens next. And if not, we'll be up and bright and early and ready to catch the culprit first thing in the morning. So, they waited and waited and waited. While they waited, they had another cup of coffee and some cake. Then, all of a sudden, and the doors blew clean off the T-Rex enclosure. What? The doors went flying. The T-Rex went tumbling. And bits of cow went everywhere. It was absolute chaos. And the T-Rex once again was flat on his back and very, very, very angry. The T-Rex went with his tiny arms as he tried to get back up using his tail. Oh, poor old T-Rex. He also bonked his head. But the doors were off. And Owen went, oh my God, you guys, somebody's blown the doors off. And Claire went, this is a nightmare. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? The T-Rex is surely going to get out now, and then he'll go on the rampage. You know what T-Rexes are like, especially when they've had a bump on the head and a bad day. they had to act super fast if they were going to stop the T-Rex from escaping from his enclosure. Luckily, it was still taking him ages to get back onto his feet. And they said, okay, we've got to get this T-Rex somewhere safe as soon as we possibly can. We're going to have to use sleepy darts. And Bob said, because Bob was still hanging out with them, he said, but where are the sleepy darts? And Owen went, I left them back at my flat. And Claire said, don't worry, I always carry a spare sleepy dart blaster in my purse. And Owen went, you do what? And Claire said, yes, of course, don't you? And Owen said, I don't carry a purse, but glad you do. So out she pulled a sleepy dart blaster. And Claire, as it turns out, pretty mean shot. And while the T-Rex was still like, on the floor, she went, pew, pew! And the T-Rex went, oh. I said, okay, T-Rex is out of action for now. We're going to have to put him in the transporter, though, because it won't be long before he's back up and able to run around and eat people. So they had to very carefully put some straps around him and hoist him up into the T-Rex transporter. And then Bob, because he was getting in on the game here, he drove the T-Rex transporter over to a spare enclosure that they'd been preparing for a new addition to Jurassic World, which was top secret. But currently, it was empty. So they popped him in there. I thought, everything is surely hunky-dunky now. We've just got to figure out who is doing this troublemaking for us. So, the T-Rex was starting to come around. And Bob was just feeding the T-Rex another half a cow to cheer him back up again when, would you believe it? That crazy noise happened again. And Bob, who was still in the T-Rex transporter, got flipped over. The T-Rex transporter that had just driven away, but was hoisting in a cow, so not driven that far away from the new enclosure, got flipped all the way into the T-Rex enclosure, cow and all. And Bob was inside, trapped inside with the T-Rex, who was now wide awake and ready to rampage. And Bob was like, help! As he was trapped inside the transporter. And the T-Rex was like... And the T-Rex had found the cow and gobbled it up. And now he wanted some super delicious pudding. And it was going to be Bob. And Bob was like, come in, Owen. I'm in the new T-Rex enclosure. I got trapped in here. I think it was that supersonic sound again. Help! Over, help! And Owen went, okay, Bob, we'll be right there. Owen and Claire raced over to the T-Rex enclosure where they could see the transporter had flipped right over the new T-Rex enclosure fence. They were like, how on earth did this happen? This is crazy! And then the noise came again. And do you know what happened? Owen and Claire went flying into the air and landed in a tree that was inside the T-Rex enclosure. They were very lucky not to land on the ground. They landed high up in a tree and they were like, ah! So they clung on to the tree's branches and looked down at the T-Rex that was going, and then they could see all around Jurassic World and they spotted the culprit. It was, of course, Balthazar Bratt. And he went, ha, 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 ha. I've got you trapped in with a T-Rex. Ha, 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 ha. Now you have to give me Jurassic World or I'm going to topple that tree. And Owen went, we'll never give you Jurassic World, Balthazar Bratt. You don't know the first thing about caring for dinosaurs. Balthazar Bratt said, I don't even care. I just want Jurassic World. And then I will have all the dinosaurs and all the people will come and see them and see me, Balthazar Bratt. And I will once again be the coolest guy in the world. And Claire went, you never were the coolest guy in the world. And Balthazar Bratt went, what was that? And he was poised, ready to play his guitar and blast them into the mouth of the waiting T-Rex. And Claire went, nothing. Well, Owen and Claire thought their number was up. Surely, this time, they were going to get gobbled up by a T-Rex. The T-Rex was that was Nanny calling. The T-Rex was sniffing around the transporter again. And Bob was in there like, Owen shouted down, don't move! He can't see you if you don't move! Bob went, okay. Clearly, time was running out. So, here's what happened next. It was quite a strange turn of events. And it was involving a very, very, very angry Stegosaurus. Now, you might remember earlier in the story, there was a Stegosaurus that got knocked over by the blast from the sonic guitar first thing in the morning. And he was still angry about it. And Stegosauruses hold a grudge, a big one. And this Stegosaurus had just spotted the culprit, Balthazar Bratt. And he sniffed him and he went, that's the guy that blasted me onto my side. I've never been so humiliated in all my life. That's what he was thinking. Stegosauruses can't talk, that we know of. Anyway, all this was going on in the Stegosaurus's head. And he went, and he charged at the gate of the Stegosaurus enclosure with such force that he broke it. And it smashed open. Balthazar Bratt went, huh? But it was too late. The Stegosaurus was running at him. Bosh! Balthazar Bratt went flying up into the air, landed in a tree, also in the T-Rex enclosure. And his guitar landed on the floor in front of the angry Stegosaurus, who stomped on it and smashed it to smithereens. Balthazar Bratt went, no, my guitar is broken. That stupid Stegosaurus, what does he think he's playing at? Oh, what a nightmare. He was in a right old grunt, which served him right. And then they thought, well, thank you, Stegosaurus, that's super duper. But what do we do now? The Stegosaurus, having stomped on things that made him angry, went off to find some watermelon, which was on a stand nearby, which was supposed to be for people. But never mind, the Stegosaurus didn't care, and he went, and he felt much happier. So Stegosaurus was fine. The T-Rex was still hungry for some humans. And there were now 3 humans in a tree, 2 trees, separate trees, and 1 human in a transporter that he kind of had a hankering after. And he thought, ooh, time to gobble up more humans. They'd make such a tasty snack. Well, he started bashing the trees. Bash, bash. And everyone at the top of the tree was like, we're going to die. Now, luckily, Claire had the presence of mind to make a phone call. And she phoned a good friend whose name is Chad. And he is a policeman. And Chad has access to helicopters. And so here is what happened next. She called up Chad. And Chad was like, hey, no worries, Claire. I will come and rescue you. And he set off in his helicopter and zoomed all the way over to Jurassic World. And he flung down a ladder out of the bottom of the helicopter. And Claire and Owen climbed up. And then he went and picked up a bit of cow. And he flung the bit of cow over the other end of the T-Rex's new enclosure. And the T-Rex went, ah, fine, cow, that'll do. And then he hovered over the transporter, and a very relieved Bob climbed back up. And then they all sat in the helicopter and they looked at Balthazar Bratt and they thought, well, it would be very tempting to leave Balthazar Bratt in that tree for a good few hours and see if he gets gobbled up. But that would have been illegal, unfortunately. So Chad turned the helicopter back over to where Balthazar Bratt was now clinging for dear life to the tree and let him climb up too. And then they all took Balthazar Bratt to jail. He had a rubbish end to his day, and everyone said, well, thank goodness Balthazar Bratt is back where he belongs, in jail, for trying to sabotage and take over Jurassic World. And they said, hey Chad, hey Bob, let's all go and have pizza to celebrate. And so that's what they did. They had actually forgotten that the Stegosaurus was still on the loose, but the Stegosaurus was a peace-loving creature by this point and was happy eating watermelon and wandering about the place. They all went for pizza and had cake for pudding, and they celebrated not being eaten by a T-Rex. And that is the end of that story. Love you. Bye-bye.